So, Alan, pleasure to be able to sit down and chat more with you about your life as a Charlton fan. So, great place to start. Where did your relationship with the club begin?
Mid-60s, probably about 1966. I used to come down to Charlton, not paying to get in, but got in through various methods. The first game I can remember actually paying to go and see was on the 18th of November 1967. And unfortunately it was a 2-0 loss to Blackpool. A Blackpool team that Jimmy Armfield, who'd been the previous England captain before Bobby Moore. So that was quite interesting. There were two things that happened on that particular day that had never happened to me before. The first one is I paid to get in and stood in the covered end for some reason, which I can't now remember. And the second one is, whereas I used to go out the Sam Bartram entrance, I actually walked up Floyd Road that day, and as I was walking up there as a 12-year-old, someone thrust a programme into my hand, and which started off an obsession with programme collecting that's lasted sort of 60 odd years now. That was the first game I paid to get in. I can't remember whether there were many more after that in that particular season, but I started probably regularly coming down sort of the following year, maybe 68, 69, which, as everyone knows, was a good year for Charlton, albeit that we didn't actually get promoted, but it was probably the best season for some time. And there were a number of good players in that team. Ray Tracy, Matt Tees, Paul Went, Peter Reeves, lots of names there that people will recognise. And at that same time, I was actually going to see other teams play as well. I had friends who supported other teams, so I was lucky enough to see West Ham with a team containing our own Billy Bonds and Bobby Moore, Jeff Hurst, Martin Peters, Harry Redknapp. And also I watched Manchester United play at QPR in that particular season. And they were in the World Club Championship at that time, so that again was a bit of an eye-opener. My first Charlton away game was the following season when we played Arsenal in the Cup, January 1969. So I went over there with a friend of mine and unwisely stood on the North Bank because we didn't really understand what the North Bank meant. Fortunately, we came out there alive. And that was my first away Charlton game, and then spent several seasons over a number of years up and down the league table, getting relegated. The next kind of upside I can remember is 1975 when we got promoted from the old third division to the second division. Which was quite a good night. We beat Preston North End, managed by the one and only Bobby Charlton. I think that was his last game as a manager anyway. And then followed Charlton for several seasons after that, up and down the divisions, until the sad day when we left the Valley. I didn't actually get to that game for a number of reasons, but and sadly I didn't go to Selhurst Park for most of the time we were there. The main reason being that it was such an awkward place to get to, But probably the other reason was I had a young son at the time who I wasn't able to take. Fortunately, by the time we left Sellers Park, we got permission to play again at the Valley, and I was lucky enough to then start taking my son to football. So we both became season ticket holders at Upton Park, and then when we came back to the Valley in '92, we were both lucky enough to get tickets for that, which was which was one of the outstanding days in my memory as a supporter. Not only because it was such a great day in terms of weather, etc., but it was the first time I was able to take my son to a football game at the Valley. So we both became season ticket holders, and we were able to do quite a few away trips, although he was relatively young at the time. And then probably the next highlight was the '98 playoff at Wembley, which again was an emotionally draining day, but obviously also a great day. And then we had a year in the Premier League, and that was the first time in my time supporting Charlton that I actually went to every game of the season. Paul and I, my son, became season ticket holders for away games as well. So we're fortunate enough to see all the games in that particular season. I can't imagine doing that again because it was quite difficult to do. It's a big time commitment. But we enjoyed our time in the Premier League, obviously with that short season as winning the Championship, which again was probably another highlight. And then all the various games in the Premier League. The one probably stands out for me the most was playing Chelsea at home on Boxing Day. I think it was 2003, where we beat them 4-2, and I think at the time Chelsea were second in the division, and we were slightly behind them in fourth place, and there was a real chance of maybe getting European football for the first time. But sadly, one or two of the players decided they wanted to leave, which probably put the nail in the coffin for us, getting to... I think it was our highest place Premier League placing of 7th, but sadly we didn't go beyond that. But we had some really great years in the Premiership. Sadly, Alan Kirbishley decided to leave, and it was all downhill for a number of years after that, till we settled in League One and Chris Powell came along, another favourite player, and took us back to the, which I think was Division 1 at the time, but it was effectively the Championship. And sadly we had a number of owners there that didn't really understand what Charlton was about and what the football club was about. Well, again, a number of ups and downs between League One and the Championship till we've got to the present day, and where we are currently in the Championship. I'd like to think we can probably push on from here in a couple of seasons and make it back to the Premiership. I may not be around to see that, but who knows. But I think we're going in the right direction as a club now. Some favourite players of mine, as I mentioned some of them earlier, Ray Tracy, Matt Tees, Peter Reeves, who I went to school with his brother Tony, so he was a favourite of mine at the time. And then along the way, Colin Walsh, particular favourite, probably above all others. Obviously we had lots of characters came along as well, Paolo Di Canio being one who was, sadly it was the end of his career, but still a great player, and more to the point, a real character. And then some of the players that are around today, Mark Kinsella, who captained the first playoff final team and the championship winning team. Lots of players from that era, probably too many to mention. But it's been an enjoyable time. One of the things I've enjoyed about it is the friends that I've made along the way, going to away games with people and involvement with the club in other ways. I'm currently involved with the Charlton Reminiscence Group and have been for a number of years, which has been hugely enjoyable. And I'm also a volunteer in the museum, which again I thoroughly enjoy. Fortunately, I'm now, because I'm retired, I'm still able to do that, and hopefully will be for a few more years. Met lots of nice people there along the way. So I'll obviously be Charlton till I die, whenever that might be. Hopefully a long way away yet. It's been hugely enjoyable.
Perfect. I mean, you covered so much that was great. Sort of talking, sort of about your early days, sort of coming. How old were you when you first started? When you first got into the ground?
When I first got into the ground, I was about 10 years old. I mean, my family. I have an older brother who wasn't around at the time for a number of reasons, and a slightly younger brother. But my dad, who was around, had very little interest in football, so I just went with friends of mine, and that's been the way of it ever since, really. As I say, one of the great joys was being able to take my son to games. And I didn't get, I was kind of very anti going to Selhurst Park, I have to say, even if things have been different and I had been able to take my son there, I probably wouldn't have gone anyway. I supported the Valley Party. Fortunately, living in the borough, I was able to persuade other people to vote for them as well as myself. Didn't get actively involved because I was still not sure whether or not they would achieve what they did achieve, which was a magnificent thing. And it just goes to show what can be done, if people have a mind to do it.
I mean, yeah, that's sort of, actually I wanted to sort of touch on sort of the Valley Party. So obviously for people sort of who are watching this who may not know, Charlton Athletic, when we got evicted from the ground, that was in the mid-80s. Yes. So when we got evicted from the ground in the 80s, there was a local party set up in the borough of Greenwich to try and bring us back to here. And obviously that's sort of one of the things that makes this club so unique, is the fact that we've left home and come back. Obviously, sort of bringing it back to sort of the more dodgy owners, obviously. Do you remember sort of, obviously there was sort of, this club has sort of a history of the fans sort of fighting for what's right, as it were. Do you sort of remember the sort of the Châtelet era? Because I remember when that was my sort of, when I had my season ticket, ironically, was possibly when we had some of the sort of the more tumultuous protests. Or do you sort of remember about that?
Well, apart from being completely disastrous, I think we possibly could have advanced as a club. From where we'd been in the Premiership, we fell out of the Premiership, obviously, And I think, despite what a lot of people feel, I felt the ownership of the club at the time, Richard Murray and Martin Simons, were really good for the club, and I've not got any bad words to say against them at all. But sadly, the motley crew of owners that we had, especially Roland de Châtelet, I think the only good thing I can say about Roland was, that has been said before, is that at least we knew the checks weren't going to bounce. But I can't think of too many other things that he did that were any good to the club, and I can think of a lot of things that sadly damaged the club. He brought a lot of people into the club that were just did not really have any idea of certainly how a club should be run, and maybe even a business should be run. Although, given that Roland was probably a billionaire, which is a bit surprising, but he had some very strange ideas on football, and sadly, some of the people who he brought in had even stranger ideas about, how a football club should be run, and he sold the club on to a complete crook in Matt Southall.
I remember it well.
And we were, I think, very fortunate to survive that. And again, although the owner who came in after that, Danish guy,
That would be Mr. Thomas Sandgaard.
yeah, Sandgaard. Again, he had a few odd ideas about football, but at least, he saved the club. He saved the club from what probably would have been complete bankruptcy, and who knows, even worse. Unfortunately, again, he had some good ideas and did some pretty good things. The women's team probably wouldn't exist currently if it wasn't for him. He did some work at the training ground, which was again quite good. Can't really think of too much he did on the men's football side that was any good. But again, you have to say that he signed the cheques, and we lost a lot of money during that period, which was always the case. For probably for a number of years, going right back to when the Glicksteins owned the club, and eventually he sold the club to the current ownership, who I believe are doing a good job. I don't know where we'll end up, but for the moment everything's going reasonably well. Especially on the football side. But I think the 3 or 4 owners we had before this current lot of owners were had their upsides, which were very few, but they also had very many downsides. And I think it's a good example of how a football club shouldn't be run. And sadly, there's a lot of owners out there currently who have some very strange ideas as well. Having said that, if I was fortunate enough to win a lot of money on the lottery, or came into some money myself, I'm not sure I would invest it in the club. I have to say, unless it was an awful lot of money. But they do say the only way to make a small fortune is to have a large fortune and buy a football club. So, currently life is enjoyable in the Championship, and certainly, life as a Charlton supporter is certainly enjoyable.
Perfect, thank you. Covering sort of the history of the ownership as well was sort of really good to sort of have an idea of what was going on behind the scenes as well. So thank you very much for sitting down with me.
Thank you.